All right, guys, welcome back to Marlins 9. My name is Jeremiah Geiger, and it's a bonus episode. Bonus episode this week. Joined on the podcast with a very special guest, Joe Frisaro, longtime Marlins reporter and over at Man on Second Baseball. First off, Joe, it's an honor to have you on the pod. Thanks for coming on.
Jeremiah, thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so we're gonna get right into it. Lot to get into today. First off, Luis Arias traded. Um, and that really signifies the beginning of a rebuild, yet another rebuild for Marlins fans. Um,
Yep.
the issue I have right off the bat is the way the front office is approaching the rebuild. I think that the analytical approach, trying to emulate the Tampa Bay Rays, is the wrong direction to go to. Um, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more later, but I kind of want to ask you right now, where do you stand on the state of the Marlins organization as a whole?
Uh, well, you probably got the impression I could be pretty blunt. It's probably never been more dire than it is right now in the whole history of the organization. So for my qualifications, those many probably know that I covered the Marlins for MLB.com for many, many, many years. Now, I was thinking about this, probably me and Clark Spencer, because this will be parts, if not all, of 5 rebuilds that I'm a part of or have some sort of say in, directly in 4 of them, as the beat writer before taking early retirement from MLB.com after 2020, but still keeping very close tabs. And I still am card carrying BPWA member and would be doing more Marlins in person if it was worth doing more Marlins in person. And this, and to your point, uh, what is wrong with this rebuild? We could talk history later, but okay, take it to 1998. Year after winning in '97, they rebuilded World Series championship players. Moises Alou, Al Leiter, Gary Sheffield. We could go Bobby Bonilla. We could go down the list. They put together the players from the Mike Loves, the Derek Lees, all the players that came with that led to the 2003 World Series. Okay, fast forward to 2005. After the 2005 season, Marlins rebuild again. But what did they rebuild with? Even though they moved Beckett and Penny and let Pudge go and move Mike Lowell and all that. Well, they had a very young Miguel Cabrera and a Cy Young caliber starter in Dontrelle Willis, and a farm system at the time that had a Josh Johnson, and some pitching, some young pitching that was capable of having good years. Okay, we take it to, and then they bring in the Hanley Ramirez immediately. The Hanley Ramirez, Anibal Sanchez for Josh Beck and Mike Lowell trade, a brilliant baseball trade, as much as it hurt to lose World Series MVPs, because Beckett was the World Series MVP in '03, and Mike Lowell eventually became, I believe, World Series MVP with the Boston Red Sox. So the level of prospect and young player was right there, big league ready to make noise. Okay, they move Miguel Cabrera a few years later. But at the time, Hanley Ramirez was 3 straight voted in by fans, starting all-star, MVP runner-up one of those years, to Albert Pujols, batting champion, and all that. So we take it to 2011, 12, 13, those years when they moved into Marlins Park, now Lone Depot Park. They do it again, and that was really the worst fire sale in terms of really breaking the hearts of the fan base, because that happened 1 year after opening a new ballpark with the promise that shouldn't happen, and bragging about Mark Burley, Jose Reyes, bringing in, high caliber or, salary players as well, moving them right away. But what did that team have? Okay, they make the trade with Toronto that brought in a lot of players, which they parlayed into pretty competitive team building towards the arrival of a core of prospects that included, and they already had on the roster, a young Giancarlo Stanton, Christian Yelich, Marcell Ozuna in the wings, JT Realmuto, some nice pitching as well. And obviously Jose Fernandez was part of that. Jose's passing in 2016, in September of 16, really prompted the sale of the Marlins from Jeffrey Loria to eventually Bruce Sherman, and also just set it all back. Because even though they had those great players, who I noted as position players, they lacked depth to win, and they didn't have the pitching that could recover from such a loss of a phenomenal talent in Jose Fernandez, who it's a shame that was a tipping point for the organization, led to the sale to Bruce Sherman. And what brought now 18, they fire sale again with Derek Jeter. Getting at the time, moving players like Stanton, Yelich, Ozuna, moving players obviously blew the Yelich trade. That was a bust, obviously. The Ozuna trade turned into a win because it got them, obviously, Sandy and Zach Gallen, who was flipped for Jazz, and we know that. The Stanton trade wasn't a bust because they moved the money. They didn't get the player returned, but they freed up the money, which allowed them to sign Sandy to an extension, sign free agents like Jorge Soler, and unfortunately to Avi Garcia. So they were spending a bit. Okay, so now here we are. And also another big difference, Jeremiah, from then and now, because I was for the fire sale after the 17th season, breaking that up. But keep this in mind. There was no expanded playoffs to the level it is now. They may have had one extra wild card. My memory fails. I don't need to go look that up. Someone can. So had this extra wild card been in place, I think two of the Marlin fire sales would not have happened, because if you could just build for 84 wins, you sneak in and you have that core. I think that wouldn't happen. Why this is the worst is they didn't try. And there's a lot of stories that haven't been told on why Kim wasn't retained. But what did she do wrong? It started there. And this is where they screwed up. Okay, all year long they're praising Kim, they're praising Skip, knowing the Marlins were kind of a house of cards in 2023. However, what happened? We saw the Mets vastly underperform, the St. Louis Cardinals vastly underperform a year ago, the Padres vastly underperformed. And guess what? The Marlins, with Skip lighting the fire to them, the every day we win the day, Luis Ariz hitting 350, Soler hitting 35, 36 homers. And next thing you know, they're right there. So this team had no business on paper, run differential, we all know, but why were they in it? Well, the system has now been created to allow mediocre teams to have a shot. So you make this fire sale now, rebuild now, only after you exhausted the window of the players you have. What? They had something to play for this year. And I don't want to hear, Sandy was hurt and Yuri got hurt. Tough. You're always going to have to, they could get hurt tomorrow. I mean, Arizona signed pitchers and they got hurt. They still went for it. Whether they get back to the postseason or not, they went to the World Series last year, meaning Arizona. They added. The Marlins went to the playoffs last year and they punted. Not only did they punt, they dismissed Kim, go a month without talking to the media, sending out statements. And then they hire Peter Bendix, roll him in, like the White Knight's going to save it all, never really explaining why they got rid of Kim and where the direction was. And what do they say? Eye on today, we're trying to be a playoff team in 2024, and eye on the future. Okay, sustainable. It's all, sustainable, whatever. It's just word salad right now. It's what prompted them to do it. Okay, and then if you're Bruce Sherman and you're unaware that if you get rid of Kim, you've immediately lost Skip Schumacher. Maybe he knew it. Maybe they knew all along, and they are playing this. Oh well, we did Skip a favor by taking his option away and allowing him to become a free agent after this year. There's more to that. I'm not going to get into specifics, but they weren't as benevolent as they want to paint it to be with Skip. Look at what Tampa Bay did. For one, and I spoke to a lot of people, no one could tell me what Peter Bendix really did as the GM. He did a lot of projects. He had analysts underneath them. He didn't build their farm system. He didn't build their big league roster. He didn't even replace his title. So whatever it wasn't necessarily, not to say it had no value, but a lot of people didn't know. He wasn't part of trades. It wasn't, so again, and I talked to other people that talked to Rays people. No one knew specifically what the GM did. But what did the Rays do in the offseason? Okay, what's going on in Tampa and the Rays way? Well, the Rays way was help build for the fact they have Wander Franco, who obviously they don't have now, but signed him for what, 180 million, generational caliber shortstop. And they win, 99 games last year?
Yep.
And they have Shane McClanahan, a Cy Young caliber pitcher. Well, where are the Rays right now? Franco is suspended. Probably he'll never play in the big leagues again. And Tommy John surgery for McClanahan. And the Rays are going to struggle to get to the playoffs. So the Rays way, well, the Rays had two building block guys, which you could put back to the 2014-15 Marlins, MVP caliber guy in Stanton at the time, young players like Yelich Ozuna, and a rookie of the year in 13 in Jose Fernandez. That's why Don Mattingly became their manager. He wanted to come in. Look at this young talent. I got an ace. I got a slugger, and we got good kids on the way. And it was a promising thing here. So what do the Rays do? They know that this year could be down for them by their standards. What do? They signed Eric Neander, their president of baseball ops, and Kevin Cash, their manager, to extensions. Those two are locked at the hip. The relationship between the GM / Pobo, whatever the title is, and the manager has to be, if you put it in football parlance, to what the GM and the coach is to an NFL team. They are one. They have to be exactly on the same page. So you remove Kim from the equation here, and you expect Skip to be happy or Skip to buy in. And I'm not buying the, oh well, they took the option away to see whether he's this or that. So either Bruce Sherman needed to be aware of a basic fact of where the sport is, that relationship, especially when you're going to go with a guy who's 100% analytics, 100%. Everything he does, his whole world is a percentage. That's why I call him Peter Percentage, because that's all he responds to. He can't think the sport in any other term. And a guy like Skip Schumacher, who is that way, but also is a grounded baseball person. So it wasn't going to work. So now next year, not only are you going to have this rebuild way of their percentage way, and their what they evaluate, the number they pay attention to internally more than any other number is WAR. They think WAR is everything. So they're going to pay attention to WAR. And so now you have a new manager next year. What's that relationship going to be like? And where's your core building block guys that are your foundation? You're going to say your pitchers. Okay, well, that's kind of a given. You need pitching to win. But your core really isn't your pitching staff. It's who are the guys playing every day? Who's the core? Exactly.
That is the question, and that is the biggest issue I have with the rebuild. And I tweeted out a series of tweets earlier. If you look at the Atlanta Braves, all right, you go back to 2015. Well, even a year before 2014, Atlanta, you could see the decline of Atlanta. I believe they finished 3 or 4 games under 500 that year. And it was clear that the Braves are going to have to retool, rebuild, whatever terminology you use, they were going to have to reset in some way. And you look at the roster 2015, 2016, 2017, each of those 3 years losing seasons. All right. You ship off, the big trade with San Diego. Everybody remembers Craig Kimbrell, Justin Upton. Um,
Yeah.
but you have to look at the little trades, like Evan Gattis is flipped to the Astros for Mike Foltynewicz.
Yeah.
You got Dansby Swanson and Ender Enciarte coming in from Arizona. You're getting rid of Shelby Miller. That was a big blockbuster. The thing with those trades,
real
y'all
quick
go for it.
before you go further. The Marlins really wanted Shelby Miller at one point. There was a little known fact. The Marlins could have derailed the whole Braves dynasty if Jeffrey Loria got his wish and got Shelby Miller. But continue.
Yeah. Well, that would have been great because I can't stand the Braves. But the way they handled their rebuild was this. They focused on establishing a core of players that they were going to continue through the rebuild and maintain this core while adding young major league ready talent. Not guys with, that are showing all these tools and are described by scouts as toolsy, but major league proven ready talent. Can't miss guys like Dansby Swanson, drafted in 2015. He's playing in the Braves 2016. He debuts 2016. Like Ender Enciarte comes over from Arizona. He's had 2 years. He was a staple in the Braves lineup, a really good fourth outfielder getting starts. And they also extended Nick Markakis, Freddie Freeman. Freddie Freeman saw every single, pretty much was playing every day for 10 years in the Brave system where they were losing games. You fast forward to 2017, 2018, now you start to see the turnaround. You have that core of players. There you go. Freddie Freeman, you build around him. Ender Enciarte, you acquired him, major league ready guy. Dansby Swanson is blossoming into a star. You look at the pitching staff. We talk about building around pitching. It's risky. Tommy John surgery. That's a big factor. You had Julio Teheran. Julio Teheran's still in the major leagues, but he was a guy that the Braves built around. My point being is they didn't strip it bare bones. They didn't trade every single piece of value, which I think the Marlins are going to end up doing. And that scares me, is because if Peter Bendix and the front office, those guys are so quick to change or to trade Luis Arias, a two-time batting champ, for toolsy prospects. The headliner is Dylan Head, who's
18, 19-year-old, whatever
19 years old in single A, and he's hitting under 240. And it's an approach that is so risky because what you're doing essentially is you're wagering everything you have on a guy that may or may not pan out. He could be Lewis Brinson. He could be Isan Diaz. Who knows? He could be Christian Yelich. And you hope so, but it's hope. It's not a plan. There's no conviction with this front office right
now. No, you could hear from Peter's voice. Peter Bendix has no conviction. He's never. I mean, the position he has is a position of leadership. And you sit around, and the first thing you say is, "We're trying to win now." Yes, in the future, but I would give them the benefit of the doubt. I may not have agreed with it, but if from day one they said we got rid of Kim, we're going to rebuild, and people say, "No, Joe, you can't do it." No, that's wrong because these people telling me, you don't tell me because I've covered more rebuilds than these people weren't even born when these rebuilds. Right. I don't need to be lectured by 20-year-olds who are trying to tell me about rebuilds. Because I've lived, it's like my whole Marlins 20 plus years is the rebuild. So you can't bluff me. Now, if I went away and I didn't jump back into the fray, then you'd believe the talking, the people that they're planting the stories with to, hey, tuck us up. And we'll get the young people who think that 4 years ago didn't even exist, that, they're like, oh, yeah. And it's like, yes, rebuild. We got to rebuild. Raise rebuild. Yeah, and all these people, no. Honesty. Because if you look at some of the people I'm interacting with on Twitter or X, they were duped into buying full season tickets. You're costing people thousands of dollars of their hard-earned money. If you had told them we're going to take a step back, I would Peter Bendix, I'd be his biggest advocate. Now I'm probably going to be his biggest pain in his butt, but he brought it on himself.
It's
And
honesty.
it's the fans that are getting screwed. They can say anything you want about Jeffrey Lurie or David Sampson, but when they made a move that they knew was unpopular, they stood there. They didn't wait a month and send out a statement. They stood up there and talked. And not just talk. When it was over, we'd pull them aside as beat writers, and we'd say, "What's really going on?" And we would know what was really going on, not being duped. And these people who say, "Oh, what are they going to do? Lie or tell the truth?" They can't tell the truth. No, you can tell the truth because there's no other sport like Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball is a completely different level than minor league baseball, than college baseball, high school baseball, little league baseball. It is a very tight knit fraternity, and people talk. And when you lose your credibility, seconds after the Luis Ariz trade was made, an old scout friend of mine texted me. I hadn't heard from him in a couple of months. He goes, "Is this guy trying to be the worst GM in the history of the sport?"
Wow.
That's the level of stuff that you hear because there's a standard. That's why you see Glenn Geffner and myself being very vocal right now, because we know the standard isn't that. They're trying to bluff you. They're trying to, and that's just wrong. If you just be transparent and say, "Stick with us," and I know it hurts, but I'm Peter Bendix. I didn't break it. I'm here to try to fix it, and I'm going to do my way. Then you could critique it. But what they do immediately, the same people that were singing Kim's praises last summer, executive of the year, all that stuff, it took them about a day to say, "Well, she did screw up the farm system. Although she used the farm system to get Josh Bell, to get Jake Berger, to get the team into the postseason, that was her job." I had no idea why. I mean, I had just pretty heated discussions with people in spring training with the organization. They probably thought I was the biggest douche in the planet because I was like, "Your team's not very good." And they're like, "Oh, well, we're going to do this, this, and this, and this." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're hoping." Like you say, use the word hope. And what happened? They proved me wrong. Well, did they? Because they literally didn't even believe that last year's team was any good.
They
Because
didn't
if
believe
they
in
did, they would have
themselves.
reinvested. They didn't believe it themselves. They didn't
Yeah.
believe it themselves. It was like I'm watching spring training. Everyone's like, "This team's a train wreck." A year ago, bad defensively, lacked power. Well, what happened? Arise hit 400 for 2 months or whatever. It ended with 350, and Soler goes from back injury every 2 minutes to All Star, and next thing you know, they're coming back from 5 runs down. I think 6 times. I think it happened. And from the eighth inning on, I think it's like a major league first time in the history of the sport. I think I saw that. It was like 6 times they came back from 5 runs down or more in the eighth inning or later and won the game. I think, and that it's like 6 times they won. So let's say you win 2 of those and lose, and you do the averages where you really shouldn't be winning those games, and if you're a probability person. So you win 2 of those and lose 4. They don't make the playoffs last year, right? Well, they have 84 wins. It would have dropped them to 80 wins.
Right.
If I got that right?
Yeah. I mean, because
I'm
they
dumb.
were
I
the
went to
second
Alabama. I have
wild
no
card.
math. Yeah, yeah. So they would have had to be, because Arizona had 83 or 84. I think they were tied, but the Marlins had the tiebreaker,
Tiebreaker.
something like that. Yeah. So, but anyway, they probably don't get in, right? If they lose, if they only win 2 of those games instead of 6, that gives them 4 more losses. So again, um, it it was a house of cards, but there's enough mediocrity and enough teams that aren't very good. If they would have signed Soler and run it back and added trade John Birdie for instead of a low A guy, a minor league pitcher, which the second, because I remember you can probably find the tweet. Everyone's like, "Oh, well, what's going to happen now that they added Nick Gordon or whoever they added late?" And I said they're going to trade Birdie. And why did I say that? Because he was making almost $4 million. They didn't want to pay him that. So
It's
they literally
ridiculous.
had all the spring training to find one team to give them a controllable big league reliever. Instead, they get a 18-year-old who may or may not be something in 6 years. So again, where's the eye on the now, Peter Bendix? Why was that not even explored? And the people, but I hear things too. They've been planning. This is going to be a long read. This isn't, then it's you can't make judgments too early on my catchers, but you could judge your batting
Right.
champ second baseman, and then you're like, that's the only offer we got. And you get the soundbite of Torey Lovullo. I didn't even know he was on the market, and I know it prompted outrage from all the analytics people. Well, guess what, people? The people in the sport have a pretty good feel for what teams are thinking. It's not that uncommon for a manager for a team in the same league to kind of have an indication if you're about to remove your best hitter, because they got to prepare to play them. You know, that if it was that easy, big league teams could fire all their front office people and have all these Twitter guys and gals who all they do is read Fangraphs and Statcast all day, and have them run the team for $20,000 each, because those kids would be like a team, But the Marlins are like a Fangraphs team, they kind of operate. It's like, if you're paying, Gaffner noted it, if you're paying every penny of a rise, why don't you take them to the deadline, get the return from it, and see if you get a better deal? You're that convinced you're not going to have a deal? Well, why are you
That's
that
what
convinced?
shocks me.
Well, yeah, I mean, and then all of a sudden you hear, like, you don't know, maybe Ozzy Albies goes down again or something. Maybe the Braves come knocking with a little bit more of return. So the other thing Peter Bendix, in my opinion, did wrong was, we're listening on everyone. Okay, so you have Jesus Luzardo going into spring training, being a hot topic of conversation. It's going to be traded. He's your opening day starter. Who does that? And then you sit around and say, oh, well, the defenders, and they're out there. So all you do is log on to X and you'll find the defenders. They yell pretty loudly. There are 5 of them, but they yell and they're like, oh, it's so smart to listen. Okay, is it smart to listen? Well, what these people don't realize is, if you're going to be the organization that cries wolf, meaning, we're looking to see what you're going to give us for a rise, but or Luzardo, you have no interest in really moving them. Teams are going to say they're just wanting us to tip our hand on who we're ready to trade. Can we switch over a little bit to my media beef?
Go for it.
You mind? This is what happens when the Miami Herald's not even covering them anymore. So you're down to basically MLB.com on the road with them. The Herald doesn't have a beat writer anymore for the Miami Marlins. They're going to kind of patchwork it. So how detrimental is this? Jeremiah, how old are you? I don't know how old you are.
I'm 22.
You're 22. Okay, so I started at MLB.com in 2002. So
Year
about
I
the
was
same
born.
time you were born. And there are 4 newspapers that travel with the team, and I was MLB.com traveling with the team. It's kind of that way for about 12 or so years, until the papers eventually started making decisions to cut back. You had people that were experienced journalists who the Twitter wasn't as big. The players couldn't, just, hey, I don't need to talk to a reporter. I'll just say my farewell on Twitter or Instagram or whatever they choose to do. So the media kind of held these people accountable. And again, if you're a team that is deceptive, you lost your credibility. So everyone, reporters included, reporters had a little bit of a shaky reputation. They wouldn't be, they'd be kind of pushed aside. If front office people, and I had people like, can't lie to them. You can't. Yes, you could. You don't have to be completely truthful in terms of, you could say no comment. You could carefully listen to how you answer a question. Well, now the papers are gone. MLB.com, when I was there, we'd write 4 stories a day. Now they write one.
Big
My
difference.
former employee. So there's the written word isn't really penetrating with fans. And for all the people that read me, I didn't have to talk because I didn't need Twitter because I was getting a lot of readership on my stuff. I got the analytics to show it and to prove it. And one reason I had a very lengthy career and they liked me enough, for a long time. You could read what I wrote and get the info, and then you could use you kind of knew what was going on. Um, Now everything is sound bites. So I kind of laugh when I see people say, "Hey, kudos to the media for asking a tough question." Those are basic questions. These aren't tough questions, but now it's like you're seeing it, and the sport 2020, sadly, with the lockdown, kind of gave the excuse where all the access we had as beat writers and media was stripped away. And then when they get rid of people like me, who was everywhere, like meaning access all day long, and get controllable young kids, they put them in, they tell you, okay, he says this, she says that. And they just quote what they say. There's no follow-up questions. There's no probing. There's so much of what Peter Bennick said that the years we're on the beat, we would have dissected that very easily. Like, what do you mean? For what example, Peter Bendix repeatedly says, Bruce Sherman's giving me all the resources. Well, what do you mean by that? Have you heard
Exactly.
anyone ask that?
No.
All the resources. What's all the resources? So are all to me, it's like this offseason, Jorge Soler came at a bargain, 42 million bargain. Um, Too rich for the Marlins. Uh, who were they allegedly interested in? Isaiah kind of Furlifa was their main free agent target. And then
Yeah.
they were shocked he got like a 2-year deal in Toronto. So spring training starts and you go from John Birdie's my opening day shortstop, which they knew that was never going to happen. So we're going to sign Tim Anderson. And basically the money, okay, one's getting 5 million, the other made like 3.6 million. So you trade Birdie, which essentially, Birdie's contract is paying for Tim Anderson essentially, or good 80-90% of it. No
I'd
doubt.
rather have Birdie than Anderson at this
Yeah,
point.
but the thing is, but John Birdie would break as an everyday guy. These are role players. They're all role players,
Yep.
and so it's baffling. Why didn't they go for it? Go for it one more year with what you had, because you still had Skip under contract. Try to give it a shot, and if it failed, if you have the injuries or whatnot, then you move guys at the deadline. But even let's say you extended a rise and signed Soler for 2 years. We don't know if he got Soler for 2 years in an option because they never seriously talked to him. So the resource would have been just the money. You wouldn't have had to trade anything. And you could move Bell at the deadline, get rid of his 16 million for next year, and and get rid of Anderson if you have to as well. But you would have a rise and Soler at least to help anchor. You can still run it year by year with Jazz. You still got Berger. Like, why wasn't this? Why is it all or nothing? Why did Luis Ariz have to go? The
They
question
have zero building
it
blocks.
was it was
Zero building
bizarre.
blocks.
So you have nothing. You have nothing. And then I take it back to, and I tweeted it yesterday. Serious question: why did they trade for Ariz to begin with? Why did they use Pablo for prospects? Now I get it. They got that Kim made the trade, and Peter wasn't here, and I get it. There are things that Ariz doesn't check defensively. He's not a power guy. We know, but Miami, no one's a power guy. But who was? Jorge
Jorge
Soler,
Soler.
because exit velocity does matter for Marlins Park because it's so freaking big. So that's a metric totally in on. But and he showed he could hit it out there when the game was on the line. So why'd you give up Pablo Lopez for 16 months of Luis Ariz? It made no sense. And Sherman could have stepped in and said, "Nah, he ain't the guy we're moving." We got other people that could help for the future that you could get rid of. You can move. Sure, people want Edward Cabrera. I know for a fact. So it's like you could you can make moves without moving the guy who started so much of your rallies, who kind of is the captain on the field in terms of the influence he has on Jazz and I get this. This is kind of the weird fit with the rise. Now, if you notice, and I tweeted a couple of weeks ago, I said I always like Jazz at the top of the order. What team? How many teams would have on opening day a Jazz Chisholm in the cleanup? Contending teams. That doesn't makes no sense that he's your
Wouldn't
cleanup guy.
happen.
Yeah, like you see the Braves. Okay, we don't need Olsen and Riley and Olsen 3-4. Let's put Jazz there. No, you want Jazz hitting. If you're taking his legs away from him when you're hitting
He's
him
a top of
cleanup.
the order guy. He's
He's
a
a top of
clear
the order
top of
guy.
the order guy.
So why wasn't it Jazz in a rise? I don't know why they didn't do it, and I don't care. Someone will say his OBP or whatever. You're doing what you think he can be, not what we know. What it is, but we also know Jazz has a flair for the dramatic and can come through with one swing, change a game. With either with his legs, with his bat, his speed. Like there's so many ways Jazz can change a game, but you never really brought that out. I'm very curious. I think it was somebody, and I guess you might have said it online, and I think Nightingale said Jazz could be the next to go. Jazz in Jazz's mind. I love Jazz. Jazz is awesome. There are things that make you want to pull your hair out about Jazz. I'm not totally with Jazz on the Miguel Rojas thing because I love Miguel Rojas. I think sensibly it could have been different, but Jazz is a star, right? Jazz
Oh
is a
yeah.
star. Jazz has flair. Jazz plays for the big moment. Jazz likes the attention.
Everything about him
Jazz
is his personality.
he wants to make money,
Who
right?
doesn't?
He's doing all this. He wants to be and exactly. He does what all the people keep Jazz. Why? You're going to draw 2,000 people and you want Jazz to be put Jazz in Fenway Park. I'm just saying it, Fenway Park. Put Jazz in Wrigley Field. What's the aura going to be? I mean, just think of how he's going to respond with 30,000 every night, 30,000 on a Monday, not
Right.
20,000, 18,000 on a Saturday on Heritage Night and 14 giveaways in Lone Depot. And we act like, what a crowd. It's
And
all
then you
relative.
turn around the
This is the
next
big
week
league.
and
Yeah,
it's
but it's all
6,000.
relative. Those are the arguments I used to have a few years ago. I was in Milwaukee. It was a week. It was a weekday series. I think the Marlins played the Brewers like 4 straight days. I can't remember the exact year, but I think it's the year they got CC Sabathia, and they got him for the playoffs. Maybe it was 11, and it was like 4 straight nights of 40,000, and the Brewers pulled the trade off. They were right there. It was whatever, right before the deadline, and their owner came out and spoke. And me being at MLB.com, helping out our Brewers writer, I was like monitoring the owner speaking to help get quotes and provide for the stories. And the resonated with me is the fans showed their support, and now it was our responsibility to add to this team. The team performed. The fans are showing. It's my obligation to, even though the return was probably more than they wanted to spend, but they saw an opportunity to get to the World Series. I think they lost in the division. I think they were in the CS and lost to the Cardinals, if memory serves, and the Cardinals won the World Series that year. But they put themselves in that position. But they were drawing 40K for 4 straight nights, Monday through Thursday. And then I come back to Miami and we draw like 10,000 on a Tuesday, and they're like, what an environment. And I'm like, people don't get it. This we got to raise our game. And I'm not going to rip on the fans. I have done that in the past and got yelled at, but it is kind of the Miami fans haven't shown enough support. It's always the whole Loria fan thing. It was always the dog chasing his tail. The ownership didn't invest more with the team because the fans didn't show up. And the fans didn't show up because the owner never invested in the team. And then the few times they did, Carlos Delgado or the Stanton contract, people still didn't show. So even though they kind of pulled the plug on things, so it was always, it was always just this fascinating, dichotomy of what was going on between the fans and the Marlins. The difference now is Peter Bendix broke the trust, and we could say Sherman broke it, but Bendix is the man who spoke. He's the one who talked.
And Bendix isn't giving any transparency. You said honesty.
Yeah.
It comes down to being transparent and understanding that baseball isn't just played on a gaming console. It's not a statistic. It's yes, that can be incorporated into how you run an organization. I'm not completely anti-analytics, but when you choose that method, solely that method to run a baseball team, you're not only putting yourself at risk to make really terrible trades, and get another Lewis Brinson or Isan Diaz for a star like Arias or Yelich back then, but you're taking the emotional aspect out of the game. You're taking the connection to the culture that Skip Schumacher was building, and I believe had built. I think he and the players of 2023, I think they believed they could make a run. I think if you ask Jorge Soler, who had showed interest in staying in Miami, hey, take this qualifying offer, sign a new contract, extend, we could build something here. You could be a part of the next, potential World Series championship team. He would have taken that. But they didn't even give him a chance. And they didn't even give Skip a chance.
Correct. Because it's always easy to look at analytics and say the risk is too great to take to sign anybody. Okay, well, you can make a case to not sign anyone when you get down to it. Regression's real, threat of injury is real, but the good ones, the good executives, the Hall of Fame executives, the Dombrowski types, the Theo Epstein types, Cashman in the day, is Andrew Friedman today. They see the opportunity to add something special and they go and do it they take the risk. Thank goodness Larry Beinfest ran the team in 2003 instead of Peter Bendix, because Pudge Rodriguez would not have been signed. 1 year, we got a young team that haven't won, $10 million on a catcher who's 30 years old, in decline, projections are this.
Excellent point.
They don't get Pudge, they wouldn't have made a run. You don't go for it, you don't take the risk, you don't get the reward. So, but rebuilds generally, I'm not sure it's going to save Peter ultimately, guarantee a front office a few years, because it's like, oh, well, it's too early to make a judgment. So it's easier to rebuild and for job security than to go for it, because you spent all that money and we didn't win. Get out of here. We'll fire you and bring in someone else. But it's about a ring. It's about, where have you heard him talk about winning a World Series? Sustainable. I personally don't think, I think that's just a BS word for this organization. And the Rays. It says they're windows. A small market team like the Marlins isn't going to be sustainable success. It's going to be windows. Hey, we got the sustainable is your starting pitching in a window where you would have had, let's say you kept Pablo and Sandy and Luzardo healthy and Yuri, it comes into the mix. This is your window with that kind of starting pitching to try to give them enough support to make a run at. What's the starting pitching going to look like in 27? Fish on first, God love them. You could put every Thomas White and, Noble Meyer low A ball stat up there, and after 2 starts, 3 starts, who gives a darn? Are they going to be? What are they going to do against the big leagues?
No clue. It's too
early.
And
on top of that, what's Peter doing? He's not doing the Rays way, although he kind of is, but they're doing a lot of stuff in their system that is a petri dish. it's an experiment. It isn't even proven methods. Practicing after games, you show up there, play, and then do 2-hour practice after a game at minor leagues. That's what some of their minor league teams are doing. I mean, stuff like that. Everyone's throwing. I'm glad Peter Gammons threw it out there because I knew this months ago and hadn't heard anyone else say it. I think this is Rachel addition to it, mandating all the pitching prospects throw a splitter, which could be catastrophic for the health of players. You don't just force a pitch on a pitcher who may not be equipped to throw that pitch. It's to me like my beef on Driveline. I'm not opposed to, I'm sure Driveline worked great for Trevor Bauer and worked great for Dan Straley and others. But it's a system. It's just almost like a certain style of weight training. Everyone needs to do that. No, some people reconnect to that. Not everyone does. But when that type of method, the day they hired their Driveline guy, I asked people around, they said they're going to throw harder and by June or July, they'll all break down. Well, what's happening? They're throwing harder and breaking down. And everyone's saying, well, you can't forecast injury. Well, yeah, you can. That's why having a smart media, people who know more than just what they're being told, just to have access. Hey, someone in the organization's talking to me. And that's what's happening to these young influencers now. Oh, someone in the organization talked to me, so I'm going to carry their water and tell it because they'll give me a scoop. I'll have insight into what they're doing. But they don't have the skill, the experience of knowing that they're being played. They're being played. And, we all did. We all, as reporters throughout the year, doing this over 40 years, yeah, you get played, but you also are smart enough to know that you're being played. And, okay, I'll take the information in the short term as a reporter, but I'm also being fed a line of bull. But, you still try to be as responsible as you can. It's like, it's great. Their minor leaguers have more data. Great. Well, a minor leaguer, you could make two arguments. Does the minor leaguer himself need to know the data, or is it better that the coaches know and just let the player develop? But it's funny. I've used this. I guess Skip Schumacher might be like reading my tweets and such, because I've noted the Marlins aren't trying to develop players. They're trying to create players. And what I mean by that is development in theory. If you have a young, I don't know, Gunnar Henderson, kid like that, just a super talent. I'm reading up on him, might be the best young player, and obviously the Orioles have a bunch of them. But let's use Gunnar Henderson. You look at his skill set. You kind of knew what you had coming in, and you allow Gunnar Henderson to become an all-star. It seems like the Marlins method is they want to create a Gunnar Henderson, meaning we could get someone who's not as toolsy, not as good, and through our genius, we will create that kind of player. So
it's not how baseball works.
It's not how life works. It's like not everyone's built the same. We don't just clone all-stars. And It was funny because the other night, literally Skip used the word. Here we have a little bit different way of developing. We're kind of creating.
Right.
The same word I use. So if Skip was listening, I appreciate that he picked up on that. But see, I pick up on stuff. I pick up on words. I pick up on what they're doing. And I've seen this for many, many years, that you kind of know what you're doing. I use this on my podcast, that it's like I use like a Bryce Harper. You can pay $300 million to Bryce Harper, or you can hope Brian De La Cruz, if Harper hits 30 homers and De La Cruz hits 25, all right, well, is he really that much different than Bryce Harper?
Right.
They think that way.
They
think they're like the same guy.
It's terrible.
And it's like, it's a weird, like, again, it's like, maybe I may not be the brightest light, but I'm bright enough to know you're not going to outthink Major League Baseball. And the Marlins seem to be thinking they can do that. And the people they're hiring are a lot of young people who are kind of happy to be in these positions, who aren't really experienced. And I mean, they got Rachel over the minor league operations, yet Gabe Kapler's on the record saying he's mentoring her.
Right.
You're
What's
either
going
running
on
the
there?
department or not. I mean, right? I mean, what are we doing? What are we
It's
doing? But the people on the beat, again, down to really no newspapers covering them anymore. MLB.com is limited in how they cover, because even though they work, employees work for the league, it's covering the team. And it's just going to be sad and hard. I just, the sad thing to me is a lot of these, and I know we're probably getting pressed for time. Um, a lot of good people could be losing their jobs because of what is happening. And I would never call, because I have a lot of blood in the game, and why I want the Marlins to succeed. I don't want this to be the bleakest time. I want to go down to Marlins Park, not feel why bother. But you can't just hoodwink the market that's been burned before and expect that just show up. Like, what was Bruce's one of his first comments at the first day of spring training? We have 500,000 people at the Caribbean Series. Well, that has nothing to do with the Marlins.
Yep.
That has nothing to do with the Marlins. It's like, how are you going to build this thing? My family had long been season ticket holders. When in a time I could just be quiet, it means that much to me to be vocal, because
Yeah.
it's not right. And I saw it, and I saw it coming a mile away. You can't half be in something. So now they could say whatever words they want, but they put themselves in this mess. And how they get out of it is going to be key. And just to the audience is like, it's fine to look at a critical eye. It's fine to want them to be good. I know you started a podcast. You want the Marlins are vital to your podcast. There's a lot of content creators and I'm now a content creator. So people want to have reason to grow there. But I think the bottom line message is you have to the best of your ability, be as transparent and authentic. I think that's kind of the word of 2024, authenticity. And like me or not, to those listening, I'm authentic. You could say I'm full of it or not, but I bring a long resume, and a lot of people wishing. And sadly, the analytics people, they're the ones that are, I mean, not just like in the Marlin system, the people I'm probably having bumping heads most with online, they think exactly like Bendix. They don't see any other way. And that's kind of, ask yourself this. How, they say Luis Ariz is one dimensional, right? Singles hitter. What are they? What's this front office's wheelhouse? They're not listening
Right.
to diverse opinions. They're installing a system that is all their percentages without having the baseball experience to know maybe this guy's slumping not because of whatever, but your numbers and your theories of why they're struggling could be wrong. And now you're going to bring in players from other systems that have learned one style of baseball their whole lives, are going to come into this practicing after game thing. And what's
It's
that going to do to
rotating.
them?
Complete
And
switch.
now if you're a nice young pitcher, you got to throw a split, which I hope they reconsider, but probably not, because I looked this morning on Baseball Savant. The Marlins starters are in the top 5 in the sport in throwing sliders. They're the slider group. And it's funny and they're in the bottom 5 in starter ERA. And I don't want to hear, because they're all hurt. That's still what you got in your philosophy. Max Meyer was throwing 54% sliders against the Braves. So this is what you're building. Meanwhile, a team like the Phillies, Dodgers, I think they were on the absolute bottom in slider usage. It's like you can blow all your arms out. You can do it either way. So as hard as you can and spin it 50% of the time when you're not doing it as hard as you can, and think that Noble Meyer and Thomas White are going to have long careers. But are they even going to make it to the big leagues if they're not being groomed the right way? So I've talked enough, Jeremiah. Thanks for having me, buddy.
No, Joe, thank you for coming on. The last thing I'll say as we wrap it up, approaching an hour. I think this is going to be the longest podcast in Marlins 9 history. I love it. It was awesome to hear from you, Joe. and your perspective. The one thing I will say to touch on your point, talking about this whole direction, this whole new analytical direction, Peter Bendix and front office. I think of the Golden State Warriors of the NBA and Steph Curry when he came into the league. Basketball today is so much more different than it was played 15, 20 years ago. But the
Yep.
issue, the way the game changed was not because of some guy sitting in the general manager role and saying, I'm going to change the sport. I'm going to turn the sport over on its head and do it my way. It was players who came in and changed the game. Steph Curry, the way he played, shooting the three, changed the game forever. Okay, and you saw more and more players emulating his style. The Marlins are trying to change the game and change the way they run a baseball organization based on computers and numbers and statistics only. And I think that's the wrong way. And you do too, but it's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
Of course, as a Marlins fan, I love this team. I mean, it's been an integral part of my life ever since I was a child. I fell in love with this team, for better or for worse, unfortunately. But
Yep.
I'm going to love this team and I'm going to continue following it. But it's bad. It's not looking good right now, and it's gonna be a while until I think we see this team with success again.
Yeah. It's going to be a bumpy ride. And the question is are the crowds going to be so low and the revenues dry up so much more that is Peter Bendix's vision even going to be is he even going to be around in 3 years? Yeah, who knows? He's already
Time will
made
tell.
three GM change. He's already got 6 years that he's owned the team. He's had three different GMs, whatever. Use the title that the role of the top personnel person. So his MO is kind of been, or his track record has been every 2 years he gets rid of the GM. So um, we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. That's all we can say right now. So we'll see. Time will tell. But once again, Joe, as we wrap this up, thank you for coming on the pod. As if you're watching this is on YouTube, follow, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Trying to really continue to develop the podcast, something that I'm passionate about. This team, and Joe, once again, thank you, and let's go fish.
Okay, have a good one.
You too.